Hey, uplifters, welcome back. I'm Aranza Savas, and I've spent 20 years at the intersection of behavior change research and coaching, helping midlife women do big, brave things. Today's a very special episode to celebrate Mother's Day. Just hearing those two words might stir something in you. And I get it. I'm a mom of two girls who was raised in turn by my mother, my aunt, and my grandmother, who adopted me when I was 6. We lost her a year ago. So Mother's Day this year feels complicated for me and maybe for you too. For some people, it's a day of pure joy, but for some, it can carry any number of flavors of grief. This week, I'm going to share a few stories from our most recent Uplifters Live. You'll hear very different stories of motherhood in all its messy, weighty complexity. So, whether you're a mother, a grandmother, an aunt, a mentor, or just a woman who has been shaped by the women around you, this episode is for you, friends. Because Mother's Day is at its best a celebration of the way we women lift each other up. We'll close out with a short sound bath from Shayla Martin, a little Mother's Day gift just for you. The first voice you'll hear is Ruthie Ackerman. Ruthie is the founder of the Ignite Writers Collective. She's a memoirist and a journalist whose work has appeared in Vogue, the New York Times, the Atlantic, and so many more places. She is also the author of the memoir, The Mother Code.
Growing up, I looked around me at the women in my own family, the 1950s mothers on TV giving Brady Bunch vibes, and the writers I loved like Anne Sexton and Sylvia Plath, who both took their own lives, and asked myself, why would anyone want to become a mom? It looked deranged, demeaning, diminishing, in fact. So why were so many women willingly choosing that path? What I didn't see were the outlaw mothers, the revolutionary mothers, the mothers forging their own path for their lives and their children's. Where were those mothers? It was only in researching my memoir, The Mother Code, that I stumbled upon the anthology Revolutionary Mothering and read Loretta J. Ross's words about moving from mothering as biological destiny to mothering as a liberating practice that can thwart runaway capitalism. Mothering as a way to thwart capitalism? I'd never even thought of that. I'd always believed that the decision to not have children was a radical act in a society that tried to force all women to become mothers. But was there a way for mothering to be a radical act too? History books are full of women who took on the mantle of motherhood as a challenge and a charge. From the 70s to the 90s, Black feminists frame motherhood as a refusal to the violence. These women understood that they didn't have to let the politics of a sexist, racist, ableist, capitalist society determine their most personal decision, whether or not to mother. These women understood that they could parent differently, that they didn't need to emulate or duplicate the images of motherhood they'd been force-fed their whole lives. This is Alexis Pauline Gumbs. What would it mean to take the word mother less as a gendered identity and more as a possible action, a technology of transformation? I jumped out of my chair when I read that. Yes, 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 that's the kind of motherhood I want. So how did my image of what motherhood had to be get so far from my desired reality? And then it hit me. The version of motherhood I and all of us have been sold is the version of motherhood that sees mothering and work, mothering and writing, mothering and self-actualization as incompatible. Who does that benefit? My journalist training from my early days at Forbes kicked in and whispered, follow the money. I put my head in my hands. It was all so obvious. How did it take me so many decades to realize it, despite all my women's studies classes in college? The patriarchy. That's who benefits from the tall tale that motherhood means self-sacrifice. If women believe that mothering means giving up everything else in their lives, that would leave the money and the power and the status to the men. What if it's simply not true? What if, as Black feminists and scores of other mothers of all colors and walks of life have shown us, we can mother differently? What if there's not one way to mother, and we've been duped into believing that motherhood needs to be all-encompassing to the suffocation of all else in a woman's life? Outlaw motherhood was all around me, in books and the lived examples of women, both known and unknown. Yet I rarely heard those voices. I rarely heard those who said, look over here. There's a way to do this whole life and motherhood thing differently. Instead, what I heard was that there was something wrong with me. I'd missed the boat. I'd gotten off track. I'd not focused on the right things, not been strategic enough, not been nurturing enough, not been selfless enough. Now I understand that the choice to rewrite the rules we are blindly expected to follow on our paths is and has always been in our hands. The mother I want to be is an outlaw mother, a mother who believes her self-fulfillment enables her children's happiness. I want to be a mother who mothers in contradiction to the prescriptive ideals of society. I want to be a mother who creates her own mother code, a code that's about consciousness, that's open to change, that isn't on autopilot, written in stone from on high. I want to be a mother who believes that there are so many ways to have a worthy and beautiful life, both with and without children. Thank you.
Now we'll hear from Katie Horwitch, a nationally recognized author, speaker, mindset coach, media correspondent, and self-talk activist. She's the founder of Want, Women Against Negative Talk, and the author of Want Yourself, Shift Your Self-Talk and Unearth the Strength in Who You Were All Along.
I have a dog. Her name is Frankie. She's a Cavapoo. Usually the conversation pivots to, okay, so you have a dog, but what about kids? And I say, no, I've got a fur baby. I'm a millennial with a fur baby. And sometimes I get the cock of the head and the raised eyebrow and you say, why not? If people have been talking to me or know me, they say, you'd be a great mom. I'm not someone who always wanted children. I also didn't not want children. When I was in elementary school, we did the egg baby experiment. My baby, Nancy, had a play date with my friend Catherine's baby, Helen. Helen did not come out of the play date unscathed. She was a bit scrambled at the end. Brainstorming about what you want to name your kids. As I grew older and I started to make plans for my life, personally, professionally, career-wise, I always would be like, oh, wait, kids. I've got to add that into the mix. Not as a desire, as an afterthought. What I realized along the way is that my addition was an assumption that I figured that I needed to make into a reality. It was an inherited assumption from people before me. It made me wonder, what other inherited assumptions am I carrying around that I don't even realize that I'm carrying? I am a words person. I obsess over words, and not just what they mean, but where they come from and what we do with them out in the world. There's like a lot of talk about innovation right now. When I think of innovation, I think of the prefix in, and then the second word, novate. So I wanted to know, looking into this, where did this word come from? What does it actually mean? And I found something really interesting. When you look up the word innovate in the dictionary, it says, to create something new. But if you take the root word, novate, and you look it up, it's actually a legal term that means to replace an old contract with a new one. So what are we doing when we are innovating? In our businesses, in our families, in our lives, we are replacing old contracts with new ones. It goes back to the inherited assumptions. How many inherited contracts have we signed without even realizing that we've signed them? And in order to dissect that, like what old contracts are we carrying around, we have to understand how we got there, right? How these contracts are written. I have spent the last almost 20 years studying self-talk. Self-talk is the internal narrative that we've got going on 24/7 that tells us who we are and who we are supposed to be out there in the world. How do we write these contracts? They come from the internal contracts that we've unconsciously agreed to. These contracts are written through the brain being your brain. We have a negativity bias from way back in the evolutionary days when we needed to look for danger in order to keep ourselves safe. There's also the psychological ways that we write the contracts through belief formation. There's a study that I am fascinated by out of the University of Waterloo that says that we only believe things, we only create beliefs if that seed of belief exists to begin with. So you don't have to believe everything, but if there's a seed, then you water it and water it and water it and it grows. And then, of course, we build those beliefs and those contracts through the words that we use. Words that can feel emotionally heavy, that can build pressure. I should do this. I have to do this. I'm so far behind. I'll never make it. And so we all have the power to rewrite those contracts that we have in our lives. We can rewrite those contracts through the words that we use, by looking through for the seeds of belief that already exist, and through modeling that out in the world. Because modeling that out in the world, it's not just about creating your life, it's about setting an example for what someone else is able to do. Building a business, building a family, building a life, and building possibility. Thank you.
Next, you'll hear from Sarah Gormley, who had the kind of career that looks amazing on paper. She worked at IMAX and Martha Stewart and Adobe and Forbes. She was named one of 2015's 40 women to watch over 40. And she spent most of those years absolutely miserable. She started therapy at 40, moved back to Ohio, said goodbye to her mother, fell in love, opened an art gallery, and wrote a memoir called The Order of Things. She's also going to give you a name in her talk for that voice in your head that tells you can't do things. All right, I won't spoil it. Here's Sarah.
Hi, everybody. This is amazing. And I'm going to cry because I'm a crier. That's me, the crier. I'm just thrilled to be here, and I'm going to try to give you something to take home with you. I think the topic on the agenda says that it's about improving your relationship with yourself. Not that any of you need it, but don't we all? So I did all of those big jobs, big companies, and what nobody knew, even me, was that I was struggling and suffering in intense pain most of my career, from childhood through about age 40 when I started therapy. Everything looked great on the outside, and I was a gal who was like, I'm going to be smart, successful, and skinny, because that's what the world wants, and by God, I did it. And I was so frustrated because, I still felt like shit about myself. I stomped my feet and pouted like, I'm doing all the fucking things, right? And I felt like shit about myself, and it increased the more successful I became, until I started therapy at age 40. We're going to talk a little bit about therapy. And then, in what seemed like a short amount of time, but wasn't, I now live in Columbus, Ohio, not far from the farm where I grew up. I'm madly in love with a wonderful man after not having any romantic relationship of any kind. And I own an art gallery, and I wrote a motherfucking book that's really good. It's like the coolest thing I've ever done, and I can't believe this is my life. Okay, another caveat. I don't really like motivational speakers, because for most of my life, The motivational speakers made me feel worse about myself. Who has heard Brene Brown speak about daring greatly? So picture me, 2016, I'm a big shot at Adobe, and at Adobe they just pay Brene $1 million to come and talk to the female executives, and she is telling us to get in the arena. And I'm like, okay, I gotta get in the arena. Brene is saying, I gotta dare greatly, I gotta be vulnerable, I gotta get in the arena. I'm like, oh my God, my dad just died. I'm about to get fired. I've been single my whole life. I can't get in the arena. I don't even know what that means. And I went home and cried myself to sleep with a bottle of Cabernet. And I'm like, I don't want to talk about getting in the arena. I want to say something useful. So, I love a good Venn diagram. So I was asked to speak to a group of college seniors. I'm a lot older, they expect that I know things. The talk that I gave was how to build a meaningful life, not just a resume. And they looked at me big, wide-eyed, so grateful. And I talked about what is your passion, figuring out what you think fills you up, the thing that you dream about doing. We've all heard that. Also, practicality, that was for their parents. You gotta pay some bills, right? Like, you can't all just quit your jobs and like go pursue your passion. You gotta pay rent. And what I said to them was start paying attention to your emotional health now. Pay attention to what drives you and why you are doing the things you are doing and why you are not doing certain things. Because my thesis is that what is most important in your personal, professional, relationship well-being is not the passion and the practicality. It's personal awareness, knowing why you're doing the things you're doing. What I didn't know when I was doing all of those big things was that I thought if I was successful enough, I would start feeling better about myself. That's what was driving me. I didn't give a shit about IMAX Films, really, although I love the company. I mean, I kept just seeking a promotion. I kept seeking big salaries because I thought if I got the thing, the external thing, I would finally feel better about myself. So fast forward to after Adobe, I come back to Ohio. My mom's dying of cancer. I started therapy at age 40 because I realized I was crying myself to sleep at night, and even though everyone thought my life was great, I felt like shit about myself, and I just decided I wasn't going to do that for 40 more years. So I had started the therapy, and therapist David, he's in the book, and I like to give you a gift called trickle-down therapy. I won't tell you how much money I have spent on therapy, but in the book there are 4 or 5 chapters of specific scenes with these little nuggets. So in one of the sessions in the first 5-6 months, I kept saying to David, I have this voice in my head. I call it self-loathing. The voice that says you can't do it, you're not smart enough, you're not going to figure it out, you're not going to get yes, you're just going to keep getting no's. We all have the voice, at least I had a really big dose of the voice. And therapist David said to me, well, Sarah, we're going to have to name the voice, okay? And I am not a very woo-woo person, as I have confessed. And I was like, name the voice? What the fuck? I'm not going to name it like Fleetwood Mac. What am I going to name the voice? And he said to me, no, Sarah, I want you to think of someone. So I'm asking, close your eyes. Think of somebody from your life, a real person, present or past, who has either said or done something ugly to you, negative, right? Do you have your name? Okay, so this is my gift to you. If you don't have the name, everybody yell Scott Kennedy. Scott Kennedy. So that is my name. Scott Kennedy was a bully on the 2nd grade playground. And in my 6th month of therapy with therapist David, I named Scott Kennedy. I talk to Scott Kennedy every day in my head. Because you don't have to, the goal is not to ignore the negative voice, right? The goal is to acknowledge it exists, hear it out for a little bit, understand where it's coming from, but say, not today, Scott Kennedy. I'm getting up on stage, I'm getting in the arena. You don't get me today. So I want you to go home and out into the world into your very busy, awesome, impressive, wonderful lives that are not perfect, that are not easy. But don't let Scott Kennedy bring you down, because he's a bully, he's wrong, and you tell him to fuck straight off.
God, I love that woman. I don't know if that really had that much to do with Mother's Day, except that it was Sarah turning the great loss of her own beloved mother into a memoir that has meant so much to me and so many other readers. And I just thought it was really good advice. And since you can't all be at Uplifters Live with us, it felt like, I mean, we all needed to hear it anyway. Next up is another little Mother's Day gift to you. I'm going to hand you over to Shayla Martin. Shayla is a breast cancer survivor, a somatic healing coach, and a sound healer. Her work began with healing her own mother wound. Wherever this day finds you, whether you just need 5 minutes of quiet or 5 minutes of someone else taking care of you for once, happy Mother's Day, Uplifters.
Let's take a collective inhale together through our nose. Inhale. And as you exhale, I invite you to close your eyes.
Thanks for watching the Uplifters podcast. If this inspired you, hit subscribe and tap the bell to stay uplifted. Give this video a thumbs up and share it with someone who needs a little lift today. Big love.
Painted water sunshine with rosemary and thyme. Dwell in the perplexing, though you find it vexing. Toss a star and hover, be your own best lover. Relish in a new prime, plant a tree in springtime. Dance with idle hindsight, bring the sun to twilight.